Okay, so we all know Nintendo, one of the biggest game companies in the world and pretty much the name brand in video games, to the point that your grandma probably calls every video game system she sees a Nintendo. No, grandma, that's an Xbox. I am playing Xbox because I am not smart. But to say Nintendo hasn't earned its reputation of being the video game company would be, well, it would be a stupid thing to say. For decades, they have made some seriously high-quality games and machines. They succeed on both hardware and software. I mean, the Game Boy has a battery life of like 376,000 centuries. It literally survived a bomb blast. Like, could you do that? If I threw a bomb at you, would you survive? If I shot you with a gun... Okay, side note, the bomb blasting, that's like actually real. There was a dude who, like, some military dude who had this Game Boy in this building in the Gulf Wars in like the 90s, and the building the building was bombed, and miraculously the Game Boy survived and still works. It's like in a museum, and it's just still, it can play Tetris and stuff. It like works. Like, these things are like the most durable machines ever created. My God. The reason I bring up all this nonsense is Nintendo has had a commitment to quality that pretty much no other game company has had over the years, which is precisely why it pains me to bring up the topic of this video, the Joy-Cons. Now, let me just preface this by saying I'm not a Nintendo hater. I love my Switch, and much of Nintendo's game catalog are in my all-time favorite games. But just because I like something doesn't mean I can't criticize aspects of it. I love Nintendo, but my God, I gotta talk about the Joy-Cons, so let's get into this. So for those of you who aren't in the know, Nintendo's newest game system, the Switch, is really popular, and it sold like 3.5 trillion units and a half, and the controllers that come packaged with the system are the Joy-Cons. These little buggers. You can attach them to the system and play games portably, or you can use them wirelessly and play games on the TV. It's great. So what's the catch? Oh, you know, the hardware is incredibly faulty and many Joy-Cons will become virtually unusable within a few months of use. Joy-Con Drift, as the kids call it. These things have so much fancy-ass technology put into them. IR sensors, HD rumble, gyro sensors, motion controls, mind reading, fleshlight, all crammed into these tiny little things, but they completely fucked up the analog stick. You know, the thing you use to control your character in most modern video games. So what happens? Well, nobody knows exactly, but after extended use of the Joy-Cons, the analog sticks on them will start to register inputs that aren't there. It starts out slight at first, but gradually gets worse over time to the point that it can start to not register inputs that are there. Basically, imagine you're playing Zelda and you're trying to go forward, and Link instead just veers off to the left and completely ignores your input. God, that would suck, right? If a controller started doing that, it would render many games virtually unplayable, right? Yes, exactly. Which is precisely why it's a huge issue, and it's happening to a huge portion of Switch owners. I think this point in particular really needs to be hammered home. Joy-Con Drift is not an uncommon thing. Millions of people have experienced it. Hell, I've had to buy replacement Joy-Cons because the pair that came with my Switch started drifting, and I just started walking off the edge of the stage playing Super Mario Odyssey. God damn it. Multiple lawsuits have opened up because of the Joy-Cons issues, so don't be one of those people who want to live in a fantasy world and be like, oh, it's not a widespread problem. My Joy-Cons haven't drifted. Because if you do that, then you are the soy jack in my meme, which in case that means you're wrong. So, okay, these products are pretty blatantly defective, so what can you do about it? Well, Nintendo has permanently extended warranties on Joy-Cons, so even if your warranty has expired, you can still send yours into Nintendo and they will fix it or replace them for free. That sounds great, right? Well, there are some catches. A, it's not available in every region, and B, it can take weeks to get them back. And if you have CGADs like me, chronic gaming addiction disorder disease syndrome-itis, you can't wait that long. When you got a game, you got a game, bro. If you're a true gamer like me, like, comment, and subscribe. Also, Nintendo has not marketed this warranty extension, like, at all. So, like, nobody knows about it. So, really, most people are just going to go buy a new pair of Joy-Cons, which will set them back $80, by the way, because it's faster and easier, and because a lot of times they don't even know that they have another option. Like, what the hell is this? So really, your only other option, unless you want to invest in third-party controllers, which have very, 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 very varying degrees of quality and functionality, is to just buy a Pro controller, which is a great first-party controller from Nintendo and doesn't drift. And don't comment, oh, but all analog sticks drift eventually. You know what I mean. It won't drift within like 3 weeks of using it. My GameCube controller is nearly like 20 years old and still works perfectly after tons of use. There's no drift. The Pro controller has been the same way for me so far. It's great. But it will also set you back another $70 when you just paid $300 for the Switch, and that also means you essentially can't play games portably anymore, which is one of the main selling points of the Switch as a console. I mean, I guess if you're cool with that, then go for it, but no matter what, this all seems like one big conspiracy for Nintendo to get more money out of people that they might not have spent otherwise. Which it is. Okay, okay, please just hear me out here. And also just keep in mind that I don't really have any like hard evidence for this. And also I have the brain of a blue Pikmin on a good day. But Nintendo's behavior and pattern of game releases this console generation has been suspicious, to say the least. I believe Nintendo not only knows about Joy-Con Drift, but they are intentionally releasing games with the intent of causing said drift to happen. The first part is pretty much the accepted truth. Nintendo undoubtedly knows that Joy-Con Drift is a problem, especially at this point. They're facing lawsuits about it, for Christ's sake. The second part is a little bit harder to prove, and I definitely won't be able to prove it here, but I think it can present some stuff that you might find interesting, to say the least. These are a pair of Joy-Cons. If you see here, you have the left Joy-Con and the right Joy-Con. It's very fancy. But if you zoom in on the left Joy-Con here, you can see you have a little... I just burped. You have a little thing called the D-pad. It's a great piece of hardware. Nintendo invented it themselves back in the 80s to allow for precise movement in games. Now, I want all you Switch owners out there to think about this very hard. For Nintendo games on the Switch, first-party Nintendo games, or games Nintendo has published, how often have you used this D-pad? Really? How often? Probably not a lot, right? This is because most of Nintendo's catalog on the Switch doesn't have proper D-pad support, even in games that really, really should. So of course, there are a few games we can just knock off the list immediately. Games like Zelda Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey are fully 3D games with analog movement. It makes perfect sense why they wouldn't have D-pad support. There's no malicious intent there. But then you have some weird cases, like the port of Super Mario 3D World. That game only has 8 directional movement, and you could use a D-pad with the Wii Remote on the Wii U version of the game, but on the Switch, nope, no D-pad support here. You have to use the analog stick. Okay, that's a little odd, but it can easily be written off as a simple oversight. Okay, what about Metroid Dread? That's a fully 2D game. Why no D-pad support there? Once again, you have to use the analog stick. There's not even an option. That's definitely a little odd, and the same thing applies to the remake of Link's Awakening on the Switch. That game didn't even add analog movement. It's 8-directional like the Game Boy original that it's remaking. Even still, you can't use a D-pad. The D-pad doesn't even have any other function in the game, so why can't I use it? Personally, I prefer using a D-pad for 2D games, so why don't I have that option? Some games you do technically have the option, but it's considerably less viable than the analog stick. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze both are 2D games that do let you use the D-pad, but it feels incredibly clunky and awkward compared to just using an analog stick. This list can go on. Zelda, Mario, Pokemon, Donkey Kong, Pikmin, Metroid, none of these games have proper D-pad support. The new Mario Party brought back the mini games where you rotate the analog stick as fast as you can. You know, the mini games that caused a lawsuit back in the 90s and were the sole reason Mario Party 1 has never been re-released. But now suddenly they're back, and it happens to be all too conveniently on the same console where heavy use of an analog stick could cause you to have to buy a new controller. Another clear sign that tells me that they're being malicious is they haven't even fixed the problem. Like, Joycon Drift has been a problem since the Switch launched, but as far as I'm aware, they've made no effort to improve the quality of the Joy-Cons, and Drift is still just as much of a problem today as it was on the console launch back in 2017. Like, why haven't they fixed it? It would be like if Xbox just refused to acknowledge the Red Ring of Death and did nothing about it. Okay, maybe it's not that extreme, but you know what I mean. How else am I supposed to perceive this other than a malicious and greedy business decision? I love the Switch. I love Nintendo games. I just wish there wasn't this pretty massive stain on the console's legacy. And for the love of God, will you people stop pretending that it isn't an issue? It's so fucking annoying. Like, really. There's all these people that are just like, oh, Joy-Con drift isn't an issue. All analog sticks drift. All analog sticks drift, bro. I'm gonna kill you. How about that? How about that? If you're gonna live in a fantasy, I'll just kill you. I'm going to come to your house and kill you. This isn't even a joke anymore. Like, I'm threatening you directly. This is your address. I'm heading that way now, and I am going to murder you. Like, you know, if you wanna. You like living in a fantasy world so much, how about you just pretend I'm not going to murder you? Oh, Joy-Con drift isn't a problem. Oh, I'm not about to be murdered. You know, like, even after I kill you, you could just like, oh, I'll just pretend I'm still alive since it's just whatever. I didn't die. Joy-Con drift isn't a problem, and I'm not being murdered right now.